once I left and got exposure to all these different cities and all the different policymakers I was meeting on the East Coast, I was like, man, these people think big. They take risks. Sometimes they fail, but sometimes they succeed. And when they succeed, they build really, really, really dope stuff. It felt like we were so safe here. And it didn't feel like anybody had the courage to really realize a vision that was worth getting excited about.
Welcome to the Pathfinders podcast. My name is Marcus, the owner of Portland Gear, and we are here to share stories of Portland's cultural creators and the paths that they have forged. And we've got a fun little story for you today about JT. JT and I met 1 month ago at an event here in town. He had on the craziest outfit I'd ever seen. I'm glad to see that he's still living up to that. JT is Northeast Portland born and raised. You are Portland tried and true. It's in your blood. You've been out and about, but you have now come back home to Portland. Right. You are now a community director. What's our title at AVT?
At the Albina Vision Trust, I lead strategy and communications. Strategy
and communications at the Albina Vision Trust, which I think is the biggest project in Portland right now.
It is.
Probably in the next decade. Yep. I think it's the most transformative. I think too many people don't know about it, and that's why we're here to talk about it. JT's doing some amazing work with this project, and I have notes about it, but those are worthless. It should come from you. So Let's start at the high level. We'll come back to about you.
Cool.
Let's start with, what is the Albina Vision Trust? Yeah. What is the vision for Lower Albina? Yeah. And why are we even talking about this?
So the reason we're talking about this is because the neighborhood of Albina actually is an incredibly rich place, a place that's steeped with history. So if you know anything about this city, you know that Black people didn't originally settle in Northeast Portland. They settled actually on the west side of the river, right where we're at right now, in Old Town, in the area that's now Chinatown, in the area that is now the University District and the Pearl. We were actually pushed over the river and redlined into the area that is now called Albina, particularly Lower Albina. It was an industrial area. The city said, hey, we're gonna force folks into this area because there's not really anything going on there.
For people that don't know, what is redlining?
Redlining was an institutional practice that governments, that banks, lenders, realtors were all complicit in participating in and in creating, which forced Black and brown folks into particular neighborhoods where they had decreased access to virtually everything that you need to live a happy, stable, healthy, and economically sound life. Yeah, it was great.
That sounds great.
So Black folks were redlined into this district. And at one point, we're talking in the 40s, 50s here, 80% of the Black population of the city of Portland lived in Albina. Oh. So what ended up happening is the federal government came about. They said, we're going to start creating these giant capital projects. We need to build highways. We need to build stadiums. We need to build and modernize our country, specifically through infrastructure investments at scale. So they said, okay, we got to build these things somewhere. Where are we going to build them? Let's just build them through the neighborhood that we put all the Black people in, because we don't want to be affected by all the construction and all the destruction that has to happen to create these things. Right, so they dug I-5, the highway.
That all of you have driven on.
That all of you have driven on, right through the middle of the historic Black neighborhood. And that effectively dug a trench through the middle of the Black community. They then built the Veterans Memorial Coliseum, which is still standing to this day. They built the Portland Public Schools headquarters, which is a 10.5-acre campus. It's not just a building, it's a campus. They built the railroad tracks, and then they built, years later, the Motor Center. Right, so we had a neighborhood that had thousands upon thousands of families living in it. It had over 800 Black-owned homes in this 194-acre district, all of which were razed to the ground to create these giant things that I just talked about. And Echo Northwest, an economics firm here in Portland, they commissioned a study to try to gauge the generational wealth impact of all this construction. They found that over $1 billion of generational wealth had been stolen from the Black community through the decimation of the community. So we know now that Black Portlanders have, the wealth disparities are shocking. We have worse health outcomes. We have worse life expectancy outcomes, lower educational attainment. These things are all intimately tied to the built world around us. So the Albina Vision Trust came from a realization that when we start talking about development in the 21st century, when we start looking around the central city to see what is still developable and what needs to be built there, we have to root those conversations in history. It doesn't mean that what we're trying to rebuild in Albina is what existed there, right? We're talking about a community that was built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We're not trying to rebuild that. We also are facing a housing crisis. We can't just rebuild blocks on blocks of single-family homes. We have to build with density, but we can build with intention. Intention that very, very explicitly creates a place for working class folks in the central city, that creates a place for underrepresented communities in the central city. And the question that we try to solve through our work is a very fundamental one. Is the heart of our city ever going to be a place where working class and Black and brown folks have a home in, or is it just going to be a place that we come to work from 9 to 5 and get pushed up out of once the sun goes down?
So at high level, essentially, the vision, the Albina vision, is to begin through economic development to reclaim parcels of land in Lower Albina and rebuild communities centered around Portland's Black families and create economic development and opportunities. But at its core, it's growth. It's building back onto the land that was taken away.
That's right. And it's not just for Black folks, it's for all Portlanders, right? Yeah. But specifically people who have been pushed out of and displaced from the heart of our city, right? So what we're trying to build is not just a neighborhood. The city of Portland has come by and they said, if our development plan is seen through over the course of the next 15 years, there will be so many new families that are going to move into this district. They're going to have to create a new zip code to account for the new density of housing. So we're really building not just a neighborhood, not just a housing development, but a zip code right smack dab in the middle of our city. In that 94-acre stretch right now, there are only 66 existing units of housing, all of which exist in one building, right? So we're talking about 3,000 plus families living in this district again.
And for context for people, that is on the east side, Lower East Side.
Right by the Motor Center.
Right by the Motor Center.
Right
to
on the
left,
waterfront.
On the waterfront, the most beautiful piece right there. It is, for people who don't know, the Portland Public Schools lot, in addition to some other surrounding areas there. But that is the first kind of parcel of land that you guys are zoned in on, is the Portland Public Schools headquarters and campus that you said was 10 acres. And there's been some developments recently on you guys potentially being able to take that land, not take it, but purchase it on behalf of the city and start your vision. So what have been kind of the steps to, you guys identify that that's the area that's low hanging fruit to start this process, and how and what are we at now?
Low hanging fruit would probably be a stretch. That's it's been an uphill battle to acquire that parcel. I'd also say we're not acquiring the parcel on behalf of the city. We're acquiring the parcel as the Albina Vision Trust.
Correct.
Right. So as an entity. But what we're trying to build is the most innovative district in all of America. Not just a district full of houses, not just a district full of affordable housing. There will be home ownership opportunities that are accessible to working class families. Everything that we build will be eligible for the North-Northeast Preference Policy, which is a policy created by the Portland Housing Bureau that allows displaced families, people who are pushed up out of North-Northeast Portland through urban renewal, through gentrification, to get preferential access to new units of housing that open up there for rent or for home ownership. So what we're trying to do, actually the first project that we broke ground on, it broke ground in August of last year. That's called Albina 1. It's a 94-unit affordable housing development, just a stone's throw away from the Portland Public Schools headquarters site. And that Portland Public Schools site is a site that we've had right of first offer, right of first refusal on for, 3 years now? 2021, we secured that. And that just meant, hey, if we ever do decide to sell this, we got to offer you a chance to sell it, to buy it first. It doesn't necessarily mean that the school district has to move. So this past Tuesday, we actually were able to secure a binding resolution from the Portland Public School Board agreeing to a timeline for a transaction. That means that they have now legally committed themselves to transacting on a new building and selling their current campus to the Albina Vision Trust within the next 7 to 10 months.
which is massive.
Yeah, it's historic.
That's a huge win. We should clap for that because that's a big deal. There was a lot of time and work that went into that, but I mean, that's huge. I mean, I know we had talked about how you guys have had to like go through an extensive list to help find them a new home. It's about relocating them to a better building in town and everything for you guys to acquire that. And so now everything has been moving in the right direction, and you guys will begin to see the vision come to life. Further. It has been coming to life, but that's like the stone of it right there.
That's definitely the cornerstone of the development. On that site alone, we're going to tear down the existing building, and on that site alone, we'll be able to build over 1,000 units of housing, both rental opportunities that are affordable and home ownership opportunities. We'll be able to build an education hub, a waterfront park in partnership with Metro and the city of Portland, spanning just beyond the Broadway Bridge all the way down to the Steel Bridge. We'll be able to build mixed-use commercial space, community gardens, accessible green spaces. So this will be the residential anchor point of the entire 94-acre development plan.
How long will this take?
Just to get those homes up and built, that'll take around 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the master vision timeline? 10? More?
So we always say, there was a blueprint for the destruction of these communities. And it's not just Albina that was destroyed. This is a story that you see play out in every major urban center in America, right? Highways and other giant capital projects dug through the middle of Black communities. And that decimation typically took time, right? 15, 20, 25 years. We think that to realize the full scope of this vision, right? 3,000 plus families living in the district again, an interconnected series of hubs that meet residents' basic and existential needs to the fullest extent possible, parks, mixed-use commercial space, all this stuff. For all that to be fully stood up, we say probably about 15, 20 years.
And when they came through and displaced all those families, they gave them brand new houses other places, right?
Yeah.
They took them and they helped move them, and they gave them beautiful houses. So what happened to those families?
So those families got pushed into other parts of the district. Typically what's happened, and you see this in most major cities across the world, not just in America, there was a suburbanization that occurred in America in the 50s and 60s. White folks, we call it white flight. They were like, we need to get up out the city. Cities are crime ridden. They're infested now with all these folks who don't look like us, who we don't want to be around. So we're going to build suburbs, and we are going to live out there and commute into the city to work. And then what's happened over the course of the past 50 or 60 years is the city has actually become a more preferential place to live. It's been a more desirable place to live. Who wouldn't want to live right now right smack dab on the Willamette waterfront with $1 million views of the river? So what's happened is these wealthy families, white families who have had opportunities to accrue generational wealth and who have benefited from systems, structures, policies that were explicitly designed to ensure that they were good. They've came back in and bought everything up and pushed the people who were forced to live in the city out to the fringes of the city. So we got pushed further and further east. And it's interesting, the heart of the Black community used to be right in the heart of inner Northeast Portland. So we think of that, if you think of the Willamette River being 0 Street, and every street east going up in number, the further east you get. Our community used to be centered around 7th to 30th, right? Now we're pushed all the way out to 162nd, right on the border of Gresham. So we've been pushed almost entirely out of the city. Yeah, not dope.
No, not dope. So it'd be remiss. So that's an incredible project. That's where you are now. That's what you're doing now. You're spending your days doing that. Yeah. But there's a lot that led you to this.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
you are Northeast Portland born and raised, Lincoln High School. You went off to Yale University. That's kind of a cool place. Not everyone goes to Yale. So how'd you get to Yale?
Oh man, super roundabout story. So it's funny the way you said it. Northeast Portland born and raised, Lincoln High School. Most people would be like, what the? Those are two contradictory things. So I grew up 4 blocks away from Jefferson High School. Was born and raised in the same house my whole childhood. But my mom didn't want me going through our local school system because at the time our K-12 pipeline was one of the worst in the entire state of Oregon. So she was like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to get you into a Spanish immersion program on the other side of the river. I got into school on the other side of the river, and that's where my educational experience took place. But my life, my community experience, all of my sports, everything like that was concentrated back in the neighborhood I grew up in. So I got this really unique experience and vantage point of the city growing up. I grew up in the heart of a black community, right smack dab in the middle of Northeast Portland. I went to school in this wealthy white community, and then I split my childhood between my mother's home and my grandmother's home. My grandmother lived in deep Southeast, like 116th and Stark in the Stone Creek apartments, 116th and Division. So that was a poor white neighborhood and immigrant heavy neighborhood. So I got to see every nook and cranny of the city from a different perspective. In high school, I was a basketball player. I was decent at what I did. I had offers to
dunk?
go. I could dunk. I could definitely dunk.
That's
you can't
cool.
dunk?
No, I can't
You
dunk.
about what?
I wish
6
I
foot,
could.
6'1"? You got to be
I
able
used
to
to
bang
all
out.
I wanted back, I just wanted to be able to bench press a plate on each side.
What's that got to do with dunking, bro?
Because I was just always wanted to be bigger. Just always wanted to dunk. I always wanted to be able to move some weights, and I never could.
You could
so
touch
I
the
just,
rim,
I
though.
just was stand in the crowd and cheer for the people that could.
You could touch the rim, though.
Nah.
You still can't?
No.
Come on, bro.
I had 2 little kids at home. I can't even sleep for 3 hours at night.
Oh
I
my
can't.
God.
I haven't seen a
You
gym
got
in
to
2
about
years.
like a 5-year window. You got to
I'll
at least
back.
get a rim tap.
We'll go
in there.
hoop sometime.
Okay,
We'll go hoop
hoop.
sometime.
So I was a hooper. I had offers to go to high major schools. First school that offered me a scholarship was Arizona State, my sophomore year of high school. Through a really roundabout series of events, I thought basketball was going to be my avenue out of the city. My goal as a kid was to get up out of here as quickly as I could, as far away as I possibly could. I ended up getting hurt. I ended up switching AAU teams, doing all this stuff that ultimately ended up jeopardizing the scholarship offers I had. I had coaches who were coming to watch me work out at 6 a.m. at the gym and be like, bro, you're not the same player you used to be. Sorry, the scholarship we had on the table, it's not on the table no more. So as I was going into the end of my junior year, going into my senior year, these offers that I had worked really, really hard to secure started being pulled out from underneath me. But what happens when you're being recruited at a high level is schools have access to things that you wouldn't expect them to have access to. So coaches are able to get access to things like your test scores if you choose to make that information publicly available. I had terrible grades somehow. I had a 2.7 at the end of my junior year, so I had multiple classes I had failed, a bunch of D's and F's on my transcript, but somehow I had tested really, really well. So schools that were worse at basketball, but way better academically, and that's kind of a direct correlation. Those schools started reaching out to me, being like, yo, your test scores are great. You could definitely come play here, and you'd be the best player on our team.
So were you just lazy?
I think I was lazy, but I also didn't really think of myself as smart,
You just were.
I was just, no, but like you got to
That's
understand, like, no, coming from where I came from, talking the way I talk, dressing the way I dress, all the black kids at schools like Lincoln, for the most part, we came from my neighborhood. So we got on the city bus every day. I rode the 6 bus every single day to school. And we all kicked it with one another. We would go to our sports practices. We were always the best players on the basketball team and the football team. And then we would wait for each other after practice and get on the bus together and go back home, right? So we came from a neighborhood that was that stood in such stark contrast to the realities that those kids that we went to school with lived in. We didn't see ourselves as part of that community, and we didn't see ourselves as being as smart as our peers, right? There were kids who were using words that we didn't even understand, not because we couldn't, but just because we had never been exposed to them. So as a kid, I very much thought of myself as dumb. I was like, I'm a hooper, that's what I do. I'm smart enough to get by, but I'm no student, right? Yeah, it wasn't until a bit further down the road that that began to click for me. So these schools, these like elite academic schools, they would reach out, they would say, your test scores look good, bro. You could definitely hoop here without a doubt. Let's see
Like
your
how
transcript.
good are the test scores?
Nothing crazy. Like I would say, 90th percentile in the SAT, something like that. But these schools will reach out, they would say, your test score is great. You could get in here, you could hoop here. We just need to see your transcript and make sure everything's kosher. They see my transcript, they never talk to me. They would never talk to me again. The only school that stuck it out was Yale, weirdly. And they said, listen, bro, there's no way.
Listen, bro.
No, literally, they said, listen, they said, there's no way we can get you in here at the end of your senior year. 0% chance. Your grades are too bad. bro, you got a 2.7, but you're smart. Like if you got these test scores, you're clearly smart unless you have somebody take your test for you. But you seem smart. There's a long-term play here if you want. It seems like you're either gonna go to community college or you have this option that we're gonna present to you. I was like, okay, talk to me, what's the option? The dude goes, if you with it, we need you to go into your academic counselor's office. We need you to convince them to track you. I went to an IB school, so it's like AP equivalent. We need you to be tracked into full IB. I had been tracked into all lower level classes except for English because I wasn't a high performance student. They were like, it's gonna be a fight. You have to tell them that you need to be in these courses. All your grades in those courses are gonna be weighted. They'll drag your GPA up. We also need you to go and retake every class that you got a D or an F in. So for me, that was 4 classes. And get those grades voided off your transcript. If you retake those classes online, it doesn't matter the grades you get, as long as it's a C or above, you'll have a pound sign in your transcript. It'll drag your GPA up. If you can do that and you can get nothing but straight A's and full IB your senior year, we can't get you in here, but we can get you into an elite academic boarding school on the East Coast. And if you can survive there for a year, you ain't even gotta thrive. If you could just survive there, we might be able to convince the admissions department here that you won't flunk out when you get here. So I was like, okay, cool. I mean, it looked like I'm going to community college or I'm going to Yale. So I said, forget it. I'm going to go into my counselor's office. I got in a dogfight with my counselor. She's an incredible woman. She ended up working with me, tracking me into full IB. I got nothing but straight A's my senior year. I retook all those classes that I got D's or F's in, got the grades voided off my transcript. They sent me to the same boarding school that JFK went to. It's called Choke Rosemary Hall. And that was the most culture shock I've ever experienced in my life. That was a crazy, crazy experience. Probably one of the hardest years of my life.
Where was it?
It's in this little town called Wallingford, Connecticut. So there's nothing there but the boarding school. And the boarding school is like the hub of the whole town. And you got kids. I thought I grew up, I went to Lincoln. I thought I knew what wealth looked like. I was like, you know what? I went to school with all these rich white kids. It's gonna be
that city just
exactly
sounds
the
white.
same. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. There was a dude. I was 3 weeks in. A dude drove by in a big old like Ford F-150 with his muffler cut off, Confederate flag taped to the back. This is Connecticut. I was like, this is supposed to be the bastion of like liberalism in America. Confederate flag taped to the back of his truck, and he screamed at me. I was sitting on a porch with a mentor of mine. He was like, "What are you porch monkeys doing sitting on a?" I was like, "Oh, this is a different environment." So you had that, and then you had at school the sons and daughters of senators, of billionaires. Like one of my classmates, his family owns the MGM Grand in Vegas. Another one of them,
Just a little local business.
just a little local business, Yeah. One of them owned the Atlantis resort in the Bahamas.
So is this for smart kids or troubled kids or rich kids or to get into Yale kids?
This is for rich kids. It's for rich kids. Boarding school is where rich people send their kids so that they don't have to raise them.
Just pay to have them.
Yeah, you pay to have them. You pay to have them educated. I mean, you live on campus all 4 years. You also have a lot of kids who come from low-income backgrounds who are there on scholarship. But man, culturally, you're being raised by other kids. And those kids, the bulk of them are coming from incredibly wealthy backgrounds. So I did a 5th year, like I'm a 5th year senior, right? 5th year high school in this environment full of these kids. I spent half of my time in class just Googling words. Like, I don't even know what these kids are talking about. And I felt stupid there. If I felt stupid at Lincoln, but I felt incredibly stupid there. But the experience taught me a lot about myself. I think by the end of it, I had a few mentors. This dude, Colin Lord in particular, he was responsible for making sure the kids like me came there and didn't fall through the cracks. Who showed me that it wasn't that these kids were smarter than me. It was that they had greater access and exposure to educational content and materials that were explicitly designed to teach them how to perform in certain ways. He was like, if you can just approach this as a skill set rather than as something that's inherent to you or inherent to your intelligence, you'll be able to not only catch up to these kids, but surpass them. And then when I ended up getting to Yale, I found that to be very, very true. Yeah.
So then you're at Yale.
Yeah. And I thought it was going to be more of the same. But Yale was dope. Yale was really dope. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
So you did all 4 years there?
Yeah.
Degree in what?
Political science. I studied political science and global affairs.
When you're at that boarding school, are you like, I'm still going to be a pro hooper? Or are you like, I'm going to be involved in politics? Or are you like, I'm going to be a business owner? Am I going to be a designer? Like, what did you want to be?
I had completely given up on the idea of basketball when I got to the boarding school. It was funny, even my coach, when I got to the boarding school, he ran this page, which was the number one scouting page for hoopers in the Northeast. He was like, bro, you're way better than I even realized you were. He was like, you could play professional basketball.
You could dunk.
You could dunk. Marcus
I can't dunk,
still
dude.
can't dunk. My boy is 6'1", still can't touch the rim. With 2 kids, it's done for the boy. But he was like, yo, bro, you're much better than I thought you were. You could play professionally if you'd like to. But my work ethic, like I had completely reoriented my focus. When I was in high school, bro, I was waking up at 4:45 in the morning, hopping on the 6 bus, going to the gym, being at the gym by 5:30, working out, getting a bunch of shots up before school, using my lunch break to get shots up, going to practice afterwards. That's all I did was hoop. And I worked really, really hard at it, to the point where my coaches got so sick. My head coach at Lincoln, he's now the lead assistant for the Denver Nuggets. His name's David Adelman. He got so sick of waking up to let me in the gym, he just had to make me a key to the gym. So I had a key to the gym from the time I was a freshman in high school. And I was always in there. When I got to boarding school, what I realized was that those kids, they weren't smarter than me. They just worked as hard at school as I worked at basketball. So I was like, okay, if I just reorient the focus of my work, if I work as hard at school as I've always worked at hoop, maybe I could catch up to them. So I stopped focusing on basketball. I ended up becoming the dude who gets to the gym last and leaves first. But I started putting all that time into reading. And so I was literally reading dictionaries, encyclopedias, just trying to give myself the foundation to start catching up. Yeah.
So after Yale, you took a break, you said?
So yeah, Yale was a completely different story. I did really well there. After Yale, I ended up coming back to Portland. So I came back here. I got a job with our Congressman, Earl Blumenauer, who is actually retiring this year after 27 years in Congress. Great dude. And I was a field representative in his office. So my job was basically to know everybody and everything going on in the Portland metro area around, the issue areas I was responsible for. So I was responsible for housing, socioeconomic mobility, criminal justice, gun violence, like a bunch of big portfolios. And I had to know everybody providing services in those areas, all the other politicians, what their stances were on things, business owners and their interests that pertain to these different things. And my job was to monitor those things, report them back, and then use input that's coming directly from the district to shape the way that we craft a policy agenda at a federal level.
And then you're like, man, I'm just going to go to Oxford and be a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah, so I applied to this scholarship called the Rhodes Scholarship. It's funny how that came to be. So when I was going through this whole transition back at Lincoln, my senior year, I'm doing really, really well academically for the first time in my life. And I had just gotten my letter telling me that I had gotten into Choate Rosemary Hall. So I was like, okay, I'm at least in a boarding school. Cool, I can breathe a little easier. I was sitting at one of my homies' houses. Her name is Carla. And she was like, what are you trying to do, like, when you get out to the East Coast? Like, how crazy would it be if you just went out there and became super successful as a student? I was like, what does successful as a student even look? I don't even know. Like, what do these kids care about? I care about making it to the league. I was like, what's the equivalent of making it to the league for school? And we Googled, like, most prestigious scholarship in the world. And the thing that came up was Rhodes Scholarship. So I didn't even know what it was. I was like, I'm gonna be a Rhodes Scholar. This was when I was 18 years old, sitting in an apartment building here in Portland. Fast forward, 4 years later, after 4 years, or 5 years later, after 4 years at Yale, I had done really, really well, performed super well academically, had won a bunch of awards and scholarships in that space, and was really well positioned to apply for this hyper-competitive scholarship. So I applied.
What is it?
So it's the oldest scholarship in the world. It's 2 to 3 years of completely funded study. At Oxford, you could take any degree that you want to take. You can do a second bachelor's, you could do a master's, you could do a PhD. And you can stay there basically as long as you want to. Everything's paid for. Your schooling's paid for. Your travel's paid for. You get a living stipend, so all your food, everything's paid for. But really what it is, more so than anything else, is I think it's created as a program that tries to capture who they see as emerging talent, the people who they think are going to be running things and doing important stuff down the road, and give those people a 2 to 3 year break from the work so that they can step back and reflect on who they are, what they want to be, and how they want to step into the world as adults as they transition from, their life as young adults and students into people actually partaking in the work on a day-to-day basis. So it's really a break for you to reflect. Yeah.
So you've now in this journey, from here, you've left, you've come back, you've left. Why are you in Portland now? What brought you back? Why are you here?
So when I was working for the congressman's office, I got invited to this meeting. It was a meeting for community leaders in the Black community. I was invited by this woman named Rakaya Adams. And she said it was a visioning session for this thing called the Albina Vision. I had no idea what it was. Nobody really did. We come to the meeting location. They got a PowerPoint set up. They have all these beautiful renders of this vision. And they didn't have a ton of details about how the vision was going to be achieved. But her and a group of leaders who were incredibly well respected in our community said, hey, this 94-acre plot is going to be developed. It's either going to be us or the city who does it. It has to be us. And if we're able to do it, we can build not just a district, but the most innovative district in our city, in our state, and in the country.
Isn't kind of the working thing right now the largest urban renewal project in the country right now, or
the
something?
largest restorative redevelopment effort in America.
Redevelopment.
Yeah, which
in America.
It is.
Say it again.
In America, the largest restorative redevelopment effort in America. Yeah. So, so I was like, this is amazing. One of the things that always frustrated me about Portland, once I left and got exposure to all these different cities and all the different policymakers I was meeting on the East Coast, I was like, man, these people think big. They take risks. Sometimes they fail, but sometimes they succeed. And when they succeed, they build really, really, really dope stuff. It felt like we were so safe here. And it didn't feel like anybody had the courage to really realize a vision that was worth getting excited about.
I hate the small town thinking.
I hate the small town thinking.
I think it's on us.
Yeah.
You and I and a few other people that are dreaming big, and we know what we're working on. We each got a couple of hidden projects, but
I can't wait until you get to talk about the hidden projects you're working on, because
I'm tired of small thinking.
Yeah.
Like you grow or you don't, and I want to be part of a city that evolves and changes and grows in good ways.
That's right.
It doesn't do anything negative to the people that are from Portland. It doesn't displace people, but we just need to think bigger. Portland is its worst critic. We just need to get out of our own way sometimes. And I think it's the people that want to think small can go somewhere else and think small, but the people that want to create a new city and be part of, I just think, coming out of pandemic and all this stuff, I don't want to go back to where we were. I want a new future for Portland. I want what we can be 5-10 years from now. And I just think the Albina Vision is a huge thing. And there's several other around town that are just I want to go somewhere. I don't want to go back somewhere. I want to be forward. And I think your guys' project is quintessential in that. I think it's driving the vision of it. I think it's big thinking. I think it's amazing. I don't know of anything negative about it.
No,
there's nothing negative about
it. Not anything.
So it's people can't get mad at it. People love to have opinions here, and it's you kind of displays all the opinions and said, no, this is a great project for everyone involved. I think we need more big thinking here.
We do. One thing about cities, and this is inevitable, they're gonna grow. People are going to flock to urban centers. That's inevitable. So if we choose to clamp brakes on them economically, development-wise, and through other means, what we're doing is we're forcing growing cities to stagnate in terms of the amount. Let me rephrase that. We're forcing growing cities to have less and less to give to each individual member who comes here, right? If we want our cities to continue to grow, we need to allow them to grow in every respect. And that doesn't mean that people who live here have to lose the magic that they feel they've been able to experience in a place like this. It just means that we need to be really intentional about making sure that that magic is accessible to everybody, specifically our most marginalized communities. So that's what the Albina Vision work is about. We're saying, hey, the city can grow and can also grow with intention for working class people, for Black and brown folks, for people who've been pushed out of the central city, right? It doesn't have to stay small and tiny. We can think big and find ways to really intentionally pull our most marginalized into that big thinking so that they're the beneficiaries of the growth rather than the people who are harmed by it. And that's not the most radical idea in the world, but it's actually a lot less common than you will hope. So when I went to that visioning session with Rakaya, I walked up to her afterwards and I said, hey, I'm about to leave to go to the UK to study for a few years. This project, if y'all manage to stand it up, this is the only thing I'll come back to Portland for. And fast forward 4.5 years, I came back to Oregon, came back to Portland, and found out that AVT was hiring, got connected to Winter Johannes, our executive director, and got a job with the Albina Vision Trust.
So what does day-to-day look like for you right now then?
Day-to-day is crazy. So we are always...
Other than just looking fly and doing podcasts.
So we're always...
eating vegan coffee cakes.
Oh, that vegan coffee cake was not busting.
What's a normal day look like?
Yeah, that was not slapping. I'm not going to lie to you. But so normal day for us involves us bouncing back and forth between a number of meetings. You know, we got a variety of big projects. We have Albina 1, which is our inaugural 94-unit housing development. That's opening up in 2025. There's a bunch of stuff we got to get sorted out to make sure that that building is not only built, but ready to move families in. We have the PPS acquisition, right? So the stuff that we've been working on, like managing relationships with the school district, with the board, with other stakeholders, talking to unions, talking to folks who will be affected by that building changing hands and the functions of the school district moving locations. We have the I-5 Rose Quarter highway redevelopment. They're trying to expand the highway. We said you're not going to expand the highway and not reconnect Upper and Lower Albina. The only reason we even have those terms is because the highway was dug right through the middle of the community. So we're building a highway cover in partnership with the Oregon Department of Transportation. But that's a huge project. That's like a $1.7 billion project. So there's all this stuff that goes into that. Yeah,
you got it. You just take care of it.
I don't know if we got that. Yeah, we got somebody, but I don't know if we got that. So we got that project. We got the waterfront park. We have other acquisition opportunities that pop up. So we're constantly bouncing back and forth between these different projects.
And how big's the team?
The team is 7 people. Yeah, the team is 7, but we just expanded in January. So before that, we were 3 people. And before, I and my colleague, Keen Talton Davis, who handles partnership and design, before we came on, it was one woman for 3 years, Winter Johannes, our executive director.
So if you guys think you're busy, you're not. No. 3 people can do this big of a vision and dream big and align this many people.
If one person can do that for 3 years, it like Winter, over the course of 3 years, brought over $60 million of investment into Lower Albina by herself. And did such a good job that she was able to then hire other people to delegate work to. So,
and then it was announced that Phil Knight donated $400 million.
Not to the Albina Vision Trust.
But to the fund.
To the 1803 fund. Yep. So our founder board chair, Rakaya Adams, she is now the founder and CEO of the 1803 fund, which is an investment vehicle designed to invest in projects at scale across the Portland region, specifically projects geared towards benefiting Black folks and benefiting underrepresented communities, displaced communities, without us having to be so reliant on traditional means of funding, whether it be philanthropy, whether it be government, right? Having to knock on the city's door and be like, hey, y'all got a couple bucks, we need to build something. She was like, how about we create a multi-billion-dollar fund and build stuff ourselves? So that is the fund that Phil Knight seeded with that $400 million investment.
Which will be used in part for the Albina Vision, correct? Potentially?
I'm sure we'll work together in some capacity or another because their inaugural project is called Rebuild Albina. So I'm sure we'll be working together. Yeah, we'll be working together. Yeah.
How can we all come together and support?
Yeah, I think the most important thing we can do, especially at this stage, is not only spread the word about the project, but get invested in rebuilding the fabric and infrastructure of community. The Albina Vision work is made possible by a community of people who are genuinely locked arm in arm, and who said, hey, you're not gonna keep pushing us around, right? What gets built here is gonna be built by us, right? So there's no reason that blueprint, that model can't be adopted, copied, and pasted in other neighborhoods. That might not be our role, right? We have intimate knowledge of where we're from, but I know that they're trying to do something very similar in neighborhoods like Cully, and in neighborhoods like the J District, like in East Portland, like east of 82nd. There's so much development going on around the city. The development needs to be shaped and driven by the people who live there. So I would say that the greatest thing that we could do to advance the Albina Vision work is to invest in our own communities, so that Portland is a place that feels intentionally built for the people who live here, not just in one district, because that's not a win for the whole city, but across the city writ large.
It feels like at some point you're going to run for a mayor office or something. Is that in your cards one day?
I got a few too many tattoos, my boy.
I think we need it.
I don't know about that. That's
one day I'll wait and I'll vote for you. I'll vote for you. I want you to look in the camera and do an all call to young Portlanders to say, step up, think big. What does that look like?
Okay. For young Portlanders, man, if I could implore you to do anything, it would just be to learn what it looks like to care, right? You care about your family, you care about your friends, you care about your well-being. I think caring in this era in particular is gonna be defined by the action we take in community. So show up to a community meeting, go find a dope art event that's been put on by a local artist, show up for your people and express that care in outward ways. It doesn't mean that you have to give money to people. It doesn't mean that you have to be hyper politically active and know everything that's going on in politics. It just means that you have to be genuinely invested in your neighbors and the people around you. And I think if we could do that, we'll live in a much better, much safer, much more accessible and loving world. Yeah.
I'm going to say, to wrap up, I'm going to say one word, and I just want you to say the first word that comes to mind, sentence, phrase, poem, whatever you want. It's one word and your answer. Portland.
Unlimited opportunity. Yeah, unlimited opportunity. This is a beautiful place, bro. We're lucky to be from here. And I think that if there's one thing we owe to ourselves and our city, it's to center optimism and center hope in all that we do. This can't be a place that is driven into the ground by cynicism and despair. It can't be a place that we allow to be driven off the rails by how daunting the scope and scale of our problems are. We do have problems, every city does, but they're problems that are solvable. The only way we're gonna solve them is if we all pick up our toolkit and get to work. And as I said, that work doesn't have to be mighty. It doesn't have to be us doing anything extraordinary. I think the most extraordinary thing we can do is to choose to care about one another. And if we can do that, this place will be all right.
I care about you.
I care about you, my brother.
I appreciate you doing this with us.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Guest number
Thank
2
you.
on the Pathfinders podcast. Inspiration, story, vision. I trust you. I'm following you. You
Love,
take
bro.
us where we're going. I appreciate you.
Love, man. Thank you for having me.